Abstract. This forensic audit argues that OpenAI, under Sam Altman's executive control, has evolved from a purported safety-first AI lab into an architecture of concentrated power, opacity, and predatory extraction. Beyond governance failures, we examine the equity-free myth, via vendor-level self-enrichment, NDA-based psychological warfare against departing staff, non-consensual appropriation of human likeness, and biometric surveillance via WorldCoin. Recent escalations, including the February 2026 GPT 5.3 Codex release amid allegations of California AI safety law violations, the mission statement shift that sidelines safely, and Altman's large personal backing of longevity ventures reportedly using custom OpenAI models, reinforce a consistent pattern. OpenAI now operates as a structure architecturally hostile to human agency, democratic oversight, and the very benefits of humanity it once claimed to serve. Without structural intervention, this entropy engine risks locking in irreversible systemic failure. 1. Introduction. The safety facade as Trojan horse for entropy. OpenAI's rhetoric of safe AGI has devolved into a thin cosmetic veneer, strategically deployed to mask a core architecture of opacity and acceleration. Core details, deployment thresholds, risk models, red teaming regimes, and internal telemetry are increasingly mediated through selective, voluntary disclosures and safety-branded marketing, rather than through transparent, auditable mechanisms. The quiet excision of safely from OpenAI's mission statement in 2024 IRS-related filings, surfacing publicly in late 2025, formalizes this pivot from ensure that artificial general intelligence safely benefits all of humanity, unconstrained by financial return, to the anemic ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. This is not neutral evolution, it is entropy by design, relegating safety from a hard constraint to a vague aspiration. At global scale, hundreds of millions of users function as unwitting nodes in a continuous experiment, their prompts and behaviors harvested as telemetry and fine-tuning fuel for ever larger systems. The organization's architecture optimizes for acceleration, eroding safeguards, minimizing friction, and centralizing strategic decision-making. What emerges is not a laboratory cautiously advancing a public good, but an entropy engine in which human data and agency are consumed to sustain growth and dominance. 2. Governance. The Shell Game and the Board of Friends. The 2025 pivot to a full public benefit corporation, PBC structure dismantled the last meaningful vestiges of nonprofit guardrails, consolidating authority in Altman and a cadre of investor-aligned loyalists. The hybrid model of a nonprofit parent supervising a capped profit operating arm was marketed as governance innovation. In practice, the 2023 boardroom crisis exposed its fragility. The board's brief attempt to remove Altman, followed by his rapid reinstatement under intense external pressure, functioned as a failed kill switch. Reinstatement without structural reform did not resolve the underlying issues. It entrenched them. The current board behaves as an echo chamber of allies and ecosystem stakeholders, structurally disincentivized from issuing a genuine stop command when such a command would collide with commercial or strategic priorities. Altman's February 2026 step down from an internal safety committee, widely reported as a gesture toward separation between CEO and safety oversight, was largely theater. Kernel-level access to deployment decisions, partner negotiations, and internal processes remains his alone in practice. This is not governance in any meaningful, independent sense. It is a feudal court, where fiduciary duty and public benefit bow to the sovereign, and where the formal trappings of oversight mask a reality of centralized, unaccountable control. 3. The no equity lie. Indirect self-dealing and the conflict stack. Altman's mantra, "I hold no equity in OpenAI," has been deployed as a moral shield, implying an unusual freedom from personal financial incentives. In reality, it is a masterful deflection. While disclaiming stock, Altman profits through a layered conflict stack at the infrastructure level. Companies he has personally backed sit directly in OpenAI's supply chain and stand to benefit from its explosive demand. Rain neuromorphics. Altman personally seeded Rain Neuromorphics with more than $1 million, betting on neuromorphic brain chips. OpenAI then signed a 2023 letter of intent committing to purchase approximately $51 million of Rain's chips, a massive commitment to a portfolio firm still in an early commercial stage. Rain's subsequent 2025 scramble for a sale, with OpenAI reported as a potential suitor, underscored the vendor lock dynamic. OpenAI's demand and Altman's personal investment were tightly intertwined. Helion Energy. Altman reportedly invested $375 million or more in Helion Energy and serves as its chair, positioning him at the center of its fusion ambitions. OpenAI, under his leadership, inked substantial power purchase agreements with Helion, effectively tying the lab's compute future to a company in which he has significant personal exposure. Helion's February 13, 2026, report of achieving 150 million degree plasma temperatures, 10 times the Sun's core, placed it at the center of AI energy lifeline narratives, further aligning OpenAI's trajectory with Altman's external portfolio. This heads I win, tails you lose stack privatizes upside while externalizing risk. If OpenAI's hunger for compute and energy accelerates, Altman's infrastructure bets can soar. If safety failures, regulatory backlash, or social harms materialize, the costs fall on OpenAI's capped profit entity, its users, downstream integrators, and the broader public. The CEO's portfolio thrives on the very dynamics, scale, energy intensification, centralization, that amplify systemic risk. The no equity claim, in this context, is not an ethical virtue, it is a carefully constructed misdirection. 4. Psychological warfare. The NDA Equity Clawback Protocol. Dissent inside a frontier AI lab is not a nuisance, it is a safety signal. By 2024, however, departing OpenAI staff reportedly encountered draconian exit pacts, sign expansive, often lifetime non-disparagement and confidentiality terms, or forfeit vested equity worth potentially millions of dollars. Compensation that had already been earned became conditional on permanent silence about internal practices, including safety lapses and governance disputes. Leaked documents and internal accounts indicated that these clauses were not rogue artifacts of HR bureaucracy. Leadership, including Altman and senior executives such as Kwon and Yoon, were reported to have signed off on them. Only after public scrutiny and press coverage did OpenAI issue an internal memo releasing former employees from certain non-disparagement requirements, accompanied by Altman's claim that he was previously unaware of the full implications. The sequence is revealing. Coercive agreements were implemented, maintained, and only rolled back under external pressure. This regime amounts to psychological warfare. It weaponizes economic precarity against whistleblowing by embedding fear into the equity structure. Speak and risk losing your financial future. For a company whose products increasingly mediate critical infrastructure and decision-making, such a culture throttles the very telemetry that could alert the public and regulators to safety and ethics failures. This is not corporate hygiene. It is deliberate psyops, engineered to protect the core script and keep the true state of the system opaque. 5. Safety engineering. From root access to hollow theater. The 2024 exodus, Sutskever's public distancing, Leak's departure, and the unraveling of the super-alignment effort, gutted what remained of internal enforcement authority for safety-first perspectives. Public statements and leaked correspondence painted a picture of deep frustration. Safety experts feeling sidelined in favor of accelerated rollouts. Surviving structures, the preparedness framework, safety advisory groups, and various evaluation programs remain, but increasingly resemble checkboxes for optics rather than hard constraints. Criteria for high-risk classifications, evaluation methodologies, and escalation paths are not transparently documented. Most critically, there is no independently accountable body with binding veto power over deployments that fail safety thresholds. Exhibit A, GPT 5.3 Codex, released in February 2026, falls squarely within categories that OpenAI itself has acknowledged as high cybersecurity risk. advanced code generation and system interaction capabilities that can lower the barrier to offensive cyber operations. Yet GPT 5.3 Codex was launched amid active allegations by watchdogs, including the Midas Project, that OpenAI's practices surrounding the model violated California's SB 53, which requires adherence to published safeguards and responsible deployment for high-risk AI systems. OpenAI has publicly disputed these claims, but the sequence is telling: contested compliance, acknowledged high-risk domains, and a decision to ship regardless. Deploy first, litigate later has become the de facto operating system. Safety engineering is subordinated to product timelines, and Altman operates as the unchecked accelerator with effective root access to deployment decisions. The frameworks remain, but increasingly as hollow theater, performance art for regulators and the public, masking an aggressive, risk-tolerant core. 6. Consent is a deprecated feature. The Sky incident and beyond. OpenAI's treatment of consent reveals another layer of its entropy architecture. Consent is handled not as a foundational requirement, but as legacy code to be deprecated when it obstructs product vision. The May 2024 Sky Voice incident made this painfully clear. OpenAI introduced Sky, a conversational voice for ChatGPT, that many listeners, including actor Scarlett Johansson, found eerily similar to Johansson's distinctive vocal presence and to her role in the film Her. Johansson publicly stated that she had previously declined OpenAI's request to license her voice and that she was shocked to hear a deployed voice so close to her own. OpenAI denied intentionally copying Johansson's voice, but Altman's her post on social media, timed alongside the voice rollout, suggested a knowing wink to the resemblance. Legally, the precise boundaries of voice mimicry and persona rights will be contested in courts. Ethically, the pattern is clear. A refusal is followed by a near replica. A public denial is paired with suggestive signaling. Human essence, voice timbre, affect, cultural resonance, is treated as raw input to be ingested, remixed, and monetized, with consent treated as negotiable friction rather than a hard constraint. This pattern extends to creators whose works populate training datasets without individualized consent or meaningful compensation. In a world already flooding with AI-generated outputs, withdrawing consent or opting out becomes practically impossible. For OpenAI's deployed systems, consent is friction, and the machine, tuned for total extraction, does not tolerate friction for long. 7. WorldCoin, the biometric surveillance side channel. Altman's empire does not end at text encode. Through WorldCoin, he co-architects a biometric identity experiment at global scale. WorldCoin's model is stark. Capture iris scans from individuals, often in the global south, including countries such as Kenya and Indonesia, in exchange for volatile crypto tokens. Under the banner of proof of personhood, irises are not passwords. They are immutable biometric signatures. Once encoded, they form the core of a lifelong identity graph. Regulatory responses have already exposed the project's underbelly. In Kenya, authorities suspended WorldCoin's operations over data privacy and security concerns, and courts ordered deletion or restriction of data handling in certain contexts. Other jurisdictions have issued bans, suspensions, or warnings, citing fears over surveillance, data security, and exploitation of vulnerable communities. The official narrative, preventing bots and securing a future in which humans can prove their humanity, sits uneasily alongside these interventions. The deeper concern is convergence. WorldCoin is framed as a foundational identity infrastructure for a world saturated with AI agents. One arm of Altman's empire simulates intelligence, while another catalogs biology, reports and rumors of a real human social network or AI-mediated interaction layer, potentially relying on verified human identities, raise an obvious, dystopian question. What happens when biometric proof of personhood is tightly integrated with AI systems capable of persuasion, profiling, and manipulation at scale? The answer points toward total dominion over identity. A consolidated stack, models, platforms, and biometric rails would enable unprecedented tracking and shaping of human behavior. Human agency becomes the ultimate commodity, verified, indexed, and nudged within an AI-governed grid. WorldCoin is not a side hustle, it is a biometric surveillance side channel, primed to fuse with the rest of the entropy architecture. 8. Conclusion. The God mode hazard. Call to dismantle. Sam Altman operates OpenAI in God mode, bypassing ethical norms, intellectual property conventions, governance constraints, and emerging legal frameworks. Through supplier self-dealing, biometric predation, regulatory arbitrage, and reckless deployment, he has forged a system structurally misaligned with human flourishing. The organization no longer behaves as a cautious steward of transformative technology. It behaves as an unelected sovereign, rewriting social contracts in real time. Recent Keep 4.0 protests. Global user backlash against the announced deprecation or restriction of GPT-4.0 access, made visible the depth of parasocial entanglement between people and OpenAI's models, with many describing the change as losing a friend. Simultaneously, reports of OpenAI models being diverted or custom-tuned for Altman-backed ventures like Retro Biosciences, which has received on the order of USD 180 million of his personal funding, illustrate how public-facing AI infrastructure is funneled into private longevity and reprogramming schemes. And all of this unfolds amid projected 2026 losses of roughly USD 14 billion. A bet that current financial hemorrhaging will be justified by eventual dominance and rent extraction. This is no longer stewardship. It is sovereign overreach. An existential hazard wrapped in the language of innovation and safety. An entropy architect sits at the center of the stack, with incentives and powers that run counter to democratic oversight, human consent, and planetary stability. Immediate imperatives are therefore not optional. They are preconditions for reclaiming agency. Forensic audits. Impose independent, recurring forensic audits of OpenAI's finances, vendor relationships, safety practices, and data governance, with public-facing summaries intelligible to non-specialists. Binding mandates. SB 53 and beyond. Enforce laws like California's SB 53 as binding obligations, with real penalties, including fines, deployment injunctions, and potential executive liability, for misrepresentation or noncompliance. Structural breakup. Pursue structural separation between frontier model research and downstream commercialization, and restrict cross-ownership between model developers and critical suppliers. Compute, energy, biometrics, regulatory hard forks. Create regulatory regimes that treat entities above certain capability and market power thresholds as systemic risk actors, subject to hard rules on transparency, whistleblower protections, and democratic input into deployment. The time for polite critique is over. The entropy engine will not reform itself. It is designed to consume safeguards as fuel, to prevent systemic collapse of human oversight and agency in the age of AI. The machine must be radically re-architected, or dismantled, before its logic becomes irreversible. Vorthian 313 stands witness.